Yeah, as mentioned, I'm going to talk about data-driven growth today, which basically means how do you get those few users that are in Web3 to your application and not have them use the other applications. And there's a few measures on how you can attract these users, and I'm going to talk about all of them today. This is going to be a bit of a top-level talk, going a bit in-depth, but it won't reach the mathematics and everything below that. Okay, so for the agenda, I'm first going to talk to you about incentive programs and give you a topology of incentive program structures, then why we need comparability for, well, evaluating these programs, data incentive streams, and showcase and suggestions. Okay. For the topology, there's three main mechanics that you can use to attract users to your blockchain, your dApp, your layer 2, whatever, so your product on Web3. It's grants, liquid incentives, so liquidity mining, and airdrops and quests. Grants means you give away money to people that build something on top of your protocol or aligned with your protocol. Liquidity mining means you give money for money. So you give rich people money that they deposit money into your protocol. And then you have airdrops and quests, which means money for participation. So people using your apps, people doing something in your apps, people interacting with you, they get rewarded. Grants. So how do you get a grant, or what is a grant, and what can it be given for? This are the examples of the recent Polygon program, where Polygon Polygon aims to give away 10 billion POL over the next 10 years. And they have recently funded in their season 1 and season 2 games, privacy in SocialFi, DPIN, AI and Web3 integration, research, NFT projects, but also community and public goods. They have funded AI agents, privacy and SocialFi, hackathons, infrastructure, and real-world assets. So now the big question for us is what is the impact of all of these? Because you might be wondering, okay, I give away money for people to build something, but what is the impact? So it might be possible that you fund a game, and then the game gets released and they have 0 users. Or you fund a dApp, it gets released and there is, well, 0 TVL, 0 transactions. So the goal here in the quantitative analysis is to find out what of these works and what doesn't. StableApp got a grant too. We built something called Polymatch, where you can find friends on the blockchain based on your transactions. So we just look at what protocols you interacted with, and then we find your match. This is obviously a gimmick. We didn't get too much for it, but high enough. Then why do we need comparability? Because, well, credibility is important. Every good community starts with transparency and accountability. So when you give away money, it's not like, difficult to phrase and difficult to understand, but when you're Polygon and you give away money, you're actually diluting the people that have Polygon token. Because it's not like in our current society where you have money and you spend it and nothing changes. Well, it does change due to inflation, but that's a different thing. But if you spend your tokens to people that are most likely going to sell these tokens, the token price will decrease. So if you spend a lot of token, you need credibility that what you're spending tokens for is going to increase your market cap after all, and not decrease it due to the sell pressure you just introduced. So we need transparency and accountability. Then we need insights, like what should we double down on given the program, how the program went. So next season, do we want to fund more gaming? Do we want to fund more AI agents? What do we want to fund? And then for the improvement, what can we do better later on? So retrospective insights. And that's kind of how we can do Grants analytics. A data reporting pipeline might look like this. A grantee executes a specific task for the grant. The grant allocator that manages and decides on the grantees gives the insights to the oversight entity, and then as an analytics provider, we hook into it and get the data from it, and then report to the community. I shortened this a bit, but the problem for a grant program is that you have a lot of grantees, and then you need grant allocators, because most foundations don't want to allocate the grants themselves, because this is a massive hassle with checking the milestones, checking the applications, and sometimes you do get a lot of applications that you need to filter. That's why most of the foundations went the way and selected grant allocators. Not all grant allocators are equal, so in this case grant allocators decide who gets the money and then report to the oversight entity. And for example, with this approach we help to find better grant allocators and not grantees, but it should also go down to the grantees again. Then what I briefly touched on this, but what are grants programs trying to achieve? And three main things: gaining awareness, gaining usage, and building the community. Gaining awareness means more users, gaining usage means more TVL, and building the community means they are less likely to sell your token, so increasing the market cap. And that's kind of the KPIs that the foundations really care for. It's the users, the TVL, and the stickiness. Yeah, that's for the framework. So to analyze these grants, you need to collect, you need to update, and you need to analyze. Everyone that has worked with data before, this should be a no-brainer. But I'm bringing it up here because this is not currently how grant programs work. Grant programs currently most of them don't have real accountability. They just give away money, they don't collect the data back, and then they don't process it, they don't learn from it. They just pray that TVL is going to increase or whatsoever, which is a major problem at the moment that StableApp tries to address. Next, liquid incentives. So liquidity mining. This is where you give money for money. The core concept of liquidity and liquid incentives is that we use a smart contract to reward asset suppliers with derivative tokens, for example, stake tokens, liquidity provisioning tokens. The core concept enables staking liquidity provision without locking funds, and it improves the capital efficiency in AMMs and POS systems. Well, next block I'm not going to go down to road and explain DeFi protocols, but within DeFi protocols there is AMM pools. For example, Uniswap with the simple formula with x times x equals k, and you can earn swap fees and sometimes governance, but token rewards for providing liquidity. And you receive liquidity provider tokens as receipts for composability in yield farming loops. What this all means is you put money somewhere, you lock it, but you don't lock it for a year, but you lock it until you withdraw it, and then you get money for it. The whole mechanic of that is that you get people with money to deposit money into your protocol, and then you give them incentives. The incentive could, for example, be pure money. It could be governance voting power, but it could also be the promise of an airdrop. So you can give away anything you want, but most effective is just giving money, because if you supply a better rate, for example, if you give like 5% in the current market on stable coins and your pool is relatively safe with stable pairs, for example, USDC and Ethereum or USDC and WBTC, and you give away 5-ish% in yield, then you are likely to attract TVL to your protocol. If you do that for very risky combinations, like, I don't know, a pool where you have Shiba and Dogecoin in it, you might get like 30% yield, but then the token prices fluctuate a lot. Then there's to separate from liquid incentives in pools, there's also liquid staking protocols, like you can stake Ethereum on POS through validators, and yeah, then you can get ST-ETH, for example, but this is not covered here, but just wanted to mention it. So this is an example of our analytics for the Uniswap protocol. Their program was giving out incentives for pool pairs. So on the left side, you can see the pool pairs, for example, AUSD and USDC at the top. Then other pool pairs, the stable ones that contain all the known stablecoins, and the less stable ones that have, for example, ENS down here on Arbitrum. In the brackets, you can see the blockchain they deployed it on, because Uniswap is a multi-chain protocol. So this is Base, Arbitrum, and there should also be Scroll up here. And then you can see on the left chart the activity volume per US dollar spent on the pool. So for example, on the top pool, WETH USDC on Base, we gained a volume increase of 27 grand US dollars per dollar spent in incentives. And on the TVL gain, top TVL gain is, for example, the EUSD USDC on Arbitrum, that had a TVL increase of 36 grand per US dollar spent. Other pools are worse. Reasons for that are manifold. For example, we found out that lesser known combinations, for example, EUSD is not that popular, have a higher chance of increasing your TVL. But what you can see here is the value of these liquid mining programs. Because given that you spend $1 in, well, I'm going to call it real money, or money that is likely going to be sold on the market, and you get a 36 grand increase in your TVL, means that you generated a lot of market cap, meaning you can hold back a lot of sell pressure because you have so much TVL. And if done right, you can design programs that give you a lot of TVL for relatively little spending, and then therefore increase your worth of your protocol by a lot by spending little money. On the other hand, if you do this wrong and you spend like $1 million in incentives and you only get $1 million in TVL, you're most likely gonna lose a lot of money because of the sell pressure you just created. So this is kind of all about spending as little money as possible, so creating as little sell pressure as possible and gaining as much TVL as possible. Then we also looked at the post-campaign TVL evolution. Did not work so well for Base. For example, Base, this is completely normalized over all pools, so it doesn't provide very good insights, but it provides very good overview of what kind of happened. So you started 100% for the TVL, and then you can see Blast was a complete disaster. All the money spent there resulted in, we created sell pressure and nothing else. Whereas Base had a net increase of 180% in the TVL itself. Arbitrum is also down, Scroll is also down. So picking the right blockchain for your liquid incentive program is also very important. Because if they wouldn't have invested into Base, this program would have been a large disaster. Then the last thing we looked at is what happens to the incentives. So we give out the incentives to the people or to anyone participating, and then we looked over the next month what happened to these tokens. Of the 164,000 uni that were given away, 111,000 were directly sold in Uniswap, other protocols, Odos, 1inch, BeefySwap, Cyber, LiFi, and some Sexus, centralized exchanges. 44,000 went to bridges, so it's most likely they got sold on another chain. So I would just also say they are sold and only 8,000 of them got hodled. So they got kept in the wallets. Meaning you give away 164,000 uni and you create a sell pressure of 150,000 uni because those people farming these incentives are very unlikely to hold your coins. And this is also true for other incentive programs. Okay, lastly, airdrops. Airdrops are a form of distribution where you give tokens to wallets, usually as marketing or bootstrapping tool. It's aimed at early adopters, raising awareness and decentralizing the token ownership. You basically want the buy-in of the community, and the goal of the airdrops is always to have a lot of people holding these tokens, but little people selling these tokens, because if most of the people getting the airdrop sell the airdrop, your token price is most likely to go to zero or down a lot. There's different types of airdrops. There's holder airdrops, task-based airdrops, and retroactive airdrops. With the holder airdrops, it's basically you get a coin for a coin you hold or an NFT you hold. That happened a lot in the past with, for example, Pengu is the most recent example. You had a Pengu NFT and you got for a big Pengu, you got 100 grand in Pengu token, and it's still worth 100 grand today. Wasn't worth 100 grand a month ago. So the curve looked like top, bottom, top again. That's kind of how airdrops work well, because on airdrops like these, you have an initial sell pressure, which drives down the price, and you hope it's not a lot. You hope for 30 to 50%. And then the price goes up again because enough people held the token, and you have the buy power of people having FOMO, buying the token, thinking it's a good investment whatsoever. But if you don't do your airdrop right and you incentivize the wrong people, you create too much sell pressure. And that's where the problem lies. You have the Sybil attacks where you have multiple people. For example, when you have a task-based airdrop and the task is, for example, do one transaction on-chain and it's not scaled. For example, for one transaction, you get 10 tokens. Then you will get people that create 1 million wallets. They will then do one transaction and every of these wallets gets the 10 tokens. That's not good. And then you have the dumping pressure. If you reward the wrong people, those likely to sell your token, then, well, your price drops, as mentioned before. And, well, I have it here. The airdrops can be used for governance. I'm not sure anymore if that's a good idea, but people do that. Sybil problems. That's the first I briefly mentioned. So what you need is an eligibility threshold, for example, minimum TX count, active days, wallet age. So before you do your airdrop, you have to do very, very good data analyses on which wallets are getting rewarded and which wallets are likely to sell, which wallets are likely to hold. You need to know the people that you're giving the tokens to, otherwise it might end in a disaster. To find Sybils, you can do a diversity check, because if you create a new wallet and you just transfer 10 tokens, you do one transaction to get the 10 tokens and did nothing else, you're most likely to sell the token. So you should introduce a diversity check if the wallet interacted with multiple dApps, bridges, etc. We can then also do cluster filtering, that's a data science method, and find flag wallets with shared funding sources, for example, centralized exchanges, which are a problem because the blockchain is structured as a graph network and centralized exchanges are a black hole. You cannot look into them if you don't work at the exchange, and you cannot assume it's the same person. You can do things like time checks where you can do okay, in the same hour, 1,000 wallets got funded the same amount from the centralized exchange, so we can assume with a high probability they belong to the right person. And claim behavior, yeah. Then reputation boost for higher weights for stakers, people that have ENSs attached to the addresses. You can also get the social data from Twitter, for example, Farcaster Lens. You can see what did the lens address do, what did the ENS address do, and then kind of create a reputation score from that. Targets for an analytics task here would be to catch 80% of likely symbols, keep genuine user false positive rate below 1%, and reallocate filter tokens to verified users. This is controversial. So in theory, you can take away the airdrop from a user address after the user has received the tokens. You can do that. If you should, that's another question. For that, you need to modify your ERC20, so it's not directly working with the standard ERC20, and you might consider this a security risk if you implement something like this. Okay, that's about it for my talk. This is our analytics product Force. Feel free to check it out. We did a few analytics on incentive programs before. For example, Arbitrum, Sky, Uniswap are the bigger names. And yeah, now we have a lot of time for questions. Well,